A lot has been happening in Ethiopia recently. Of course, you would have seen the dam controversy and the countries starting to fill the dam, even though Egypt and Sudan perhaps not quite happy with the negotiations process so far. And also we saw some unrest in the country a little bit earlier on. But it has had its pluses. Their Prime Minister has won a Nobel Peace Prize and has been working hard to change and create a new Egypt. I mean a new Ethiopia. I caught up with the Ethiopian Ambassador in South Africa, Shiferaw Teklemariam, and we talked about a lot of these issues, and we began talking about the dam controversy, and I asked him right on the outset what he thought was the sticking point in coming to an agreement.
But as you very much, and as everyone will be very much aware, this is a hydropower project that generates power, and then the river flows its natural course. And this is also a dam, the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, that is basically aimed to relieve the abject poverty in the nation, and also for 60 million Ethiopians who are deprived of any kind of electricity. So it's a hydropower project. It's Ethiopian hydropower project, but it's African hydropower project as well. I think the real challenge is that there are what we call colonial treaties of the 1929 and particularly the 1959 that denies that this river belongs for more than Egypt and more than Sudan as well. And the colonial treaty says this river is given in absolute hegemony and with veto power to these two nations. And I think the sticky point starts by this belief of the colonial treaties that no one should be sharing or caring from this river except what those colonial treaties, which Ethiopia is not party to and which Ethiopia doesn't recognize as well, is maintained to be the status quo. Otherwise, there is no any reason. And as we know, this is a project for development as a hydropower project, and it's also a project that contributes to the continent in terms of economic integration, regional economic integration. This is also a project that contributes even equally to the lower downstream countries in terms of the what we call the regular flow, smooth flow, avoiding siltation, avoiding flooding, and also even increasing the performance of the hydropower project, which they do have, but when they built, they were not consulted on Ethiopian side, but the Ethiopian side, on the other hand, doing several consultations to make sure trust and confidence are maintained and in place.
All right, perhaps finally, are you confident that Addis, Khartoum and Cairo will find each other in settling this matter once and for all?
Peter, I'm very much confident. What it requires is the trust and confidence among the parties themselves. And we are also very much confident this is a hydropower project, an Ethiopian project, but also it's an African project. But very recently, as you know very well, that this matter now is brought to the African soil above all. And I would like to mention at this joint that the AU mechanism chaired by the President of the Republic of South Africa as AU chair, and with the principles of what we call African solution to African problems, is actually taking a lead and we have all the trust and confidence that the AU process will finally bring the ultimate solution. But at the same time, I would like to also underline it's the readiness and the trust of the African member states, in this case, the 3 countries who are at the same time responsible for continental causes, need to come to closer and address their issues in such a way that they have all the responsibility for the citizens and people of the 3 countries. Ethiopia has a responsibility for Egypt, Ethiopia has a responsibility for Sudan's population, and the same is true. Egypt has also a responsibility to taking care of or looking after the Ethiopian population in the Sudan as well. So in the spirit of Pan-Africanism and also African Renaissance and also the Agenda 2063, which is Africa we want, such projects needn't be or shouldn't be the cause of peace and security challenge, but the cause of cooperation and also collaboration. So I trust the 3 countries, with the facilitation of AU and with the chairmanship of Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, which is doing really a wonderful job, will bring a fruition at the end.
All right, so back home, we've seen some unrest in recent weeks, and that followed the killing of celebrated singer Hachalu Hundessa. And I wonder if you could just take us through why his killing sparked so much unrest, and if it doesn't point to underlying issues such as ethnic tensions.
Yeah, thank you so much. We, as a government and as a people, were very much saddened by the assassination of our artist Hachalu Hundessa, which was a very, very unfortunate incident, which as the rule of law makes it as justice that all the perpetrators behind it closely as well as in long hands need to be brought into the justice system and into the rule of law. As you rightly said, this artist Hachalu, who was part and parcel of the whole reform process in the nation, with a background of bringing more and more a widened economic as well as political spaces for all kinds of actors, was a process which we have been going since 2018. Then what happened is the number of prisoners, particularly political prisoners, who are imprisoned in the country, as well as those opposition leaders, as well as members who are in exile, as well as an opening up of real political space and, in fact, subsequently economic spaces were taking place in the nation. Everyone is happy, everyone is moving. Our Prime Minister's team, when the Prime Minister came into power in what we call a peaceful transition, was a principle of inclusiveness and reconciliation, which we call it the philosophy of Maddamar, which means the only way we can succeed in Ethiopian circumstances, probably the same is true elsewhere, is by inclusiveness and reconciliation of what you call taking the good parts or the best lessons from the past, also rectifying the mistakes of the past, including the current context, and also the foreseeing what is continentally and globally feasible. So this was like the initiative that's taking spaces as well, opening up of the economic sphere, and so on and so on.
All right.
So what happened is there are there are few elements and individuals who were not happy about this process. Of course, any discontent, Peter, can be processed peacefully, democratically, and also following the rule of law. So what happened is there are elements who are internally as well as externally linked to destabilize and dismantle they want to create a scramble of diversities in Ethiopia, which they couldn't succeed. Now Ethiopia is even today is thriving and surviving and surviving and thriving. But I will tell you, those who are behind this, they'll come under the rule of law.
So talking about the rule of law, people were concerned that your government shut down the internet during these protests. Was such a move necessary?
Yeah, Peter, of course, you brought a very important point. There are a number of instigations that are anti-ethnic and anti-religious as a consequence of this event, particularly to achieve what they wanted to achieve on their own design, which they couldn't make it to happen because of the great bond in the nation. So it's always very important to weigh the advantage and disadvantage of the temporary steps for what we call a sustainable, in fact, the long-term values of any kinds of technology. There are people who maximize mainstream media as well as social media to instigate anti-ethnic as well as anti-religious atrocities. So until these people come into custodies, or what to call, until they are properly handled, it was very important even to take those measures, because there is no way, we know such kind of actions created different kinds of massive damage, massive messes in several parts of the continent, as well as this also global experience. So it was a temporary measure. Now, as we speak, that's already opened and operational, but it's also a message which people may be sitting in a different, what you call a comfortable and comfort zones, be it in the country or outside of the country, who would like to send a message and signal such that people and various diversities could not cooperate and collaborate in the matter and in their fates as well. So this was the background, and when such acts are under control, then everything is back to normal. And as we speak now, the life and activities and everything is as usual and proceeding as normal as well.
Why do we have 2.5 million people displaced by ethnic violence? And we see the Tigray People's Liberation Front tensions escalating with the federal government. What can the central government do to manage all of these challenges?
Yeah, I think the way we have good enough, we have what you call a constitution to be governed with. We have also the federal institutions to be governed with. And any kind of dissent or any kind of discontent has also a mechanism in the current constitution. So what is required is people need to move peacefully, democratically, and under the rule of law, whatever they want and they would like to achieve. Now, anything which is outside this framework, the constitutional framework, it may have its own consequences. So it's not, Peter, it's not because the regional arrangement is creating that. It's the individuals who do have their own interests, who do have their own what you call backgrounds that may be creating those kind of consequences. And the federal government is now more and more waiting for a matter to create what they call a peaceful resolve of all these issues, and also within the reconciliation and inclusiveness principles, that when things are beyond and above those, now the rule of law prevail.
We've seen the Prime Minister push through a new Ethiopia, a lot of reforms taking place, and I just wonder if everybody is ready and willing to take on board those reforms. I mean, we saw his army chief in Amhara get killed recently in what looked like an attempted coup. Is everybody on board with his reforms, or are they happening too quickly?
I think, as you rightly mentioned, our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, by the way, he also visited the Republic of South Africa at early weeks of the January this year, which I may say a few words later on. He came up and, in fact, with several reform agenda items that are being probably delivered in decades and decades, if not otherwise. But he achieved in less than 2 years very, very great achievements, to say, in all kinds of standards. The first one is the peace reform agenda items. Peter, you may remember the conflict, the war between Eritrea and Ethiopia took many lives, and for almost 20 years it was what you call a no peace, no war zone. Prime Minister Dr. Abiy resolved it like it's like something from your own gut and from your own heart and mind that brings everyone, and that was in fact one of the very reasons also for his the Nobel Prize, which was delivered. His political reforms, Peter, it's creating, as we said earlier, is to bring the space as wide as possible, so that any kind of the discontent or dissent will be accommodated, and people, because of their opinions, attitudes, or positions, will not need to be thrown away from the country. And as a result, there are several opposition leaders and opposition members who come back into the country and to exercise their own ideological stance, organizational stance, and institutional stance as well. Subsequently, there were also a number of legislations, policies that are also put in place, which will help whatever we described earlier will be a reality as well. Civic movements, individual organizations, everything was allowed in the country so that people can enjoy the right democratic and political space as we speak. And subsequently, there are several organizations that are reviewed their own mandates and also their own legislature so that it will bring the required change. There are also several economic reforms as well that has taken place. And under the economic reforms, there is also a homegrown economic reform that addressed, including the mega projects that were traditionally owned by the government, where the private sector also could take part. So the major economic as well as political reforms, also all of them come in within what you call under the inclusiveness and reconciliation framework, where it's only and only that all of us are united, all of us are ready to listen to each other, and when there is a difference, discuss through what you call the ideals rather than the traditional old-fashioned way of approaching differences. So this reform is actually very much inclusive. Everyone is happy. Of course, as you may know, we are also in transition. So when you have in a reform transition, there are issues which you may need to clarify, and some people also, they may have their own ego again, which they may not be happy on the reform that has taken place.
You talked about the region and the continent, and perhaps as we start to wrap this conversation up, I'd just like to get your sense about what your country's vision is for this new Ethiopia in the world. We know that you've scored these successes in Eritrea. The president was there recently, welcomed by President Afwerki, and I think that's a symbol of huge change, as you've described just now. What about the rest of the region and the continent? What does Ethiopia want to contribute? I know that consensus and working together is something that's important for AU leadership.
Thank you so much, Peter. Again, I think regardless of the Ethiopian governance systems, Ethiopia has always been and consistently tried to achieve or live the expectations of the spirit of Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance. And of course, starting the great contribution of Adwa victory, which we feel is one of the victories that paved the way for the continent's freedom and sovereignty. Ethiopia remained always very firm towards the Africa's cause. Ethiopia has always been a firm believer of the African causes, and the various projects, including the Ethiopian Renaissance, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as well, is also an African project. And as you know, since the formation of OAU, Organization of African Unity, and also subsequently to African Union, Ethiopia, and also, of course, as a seat of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa as well, Ethiopia serves the best possible services for the continental cause. So I was saying our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, also is following the same path, strengthening the regional blocks, and also the regional blocks strengthening themselves so that Africa will have the stronger African identity and also African sovereignty. And as you rightly understand, we always strive for African solutions as well. African solutions for African problems. So our historical contribution, also be it in front of the United Nations platform or continental platform, being even you may take the cases of the Republic of South Africa, as well as the Republic of Namibia, and so on, how we were fighting for the African sovereignty cause, African freedom cause, and also making sure that these countries, the African continent, member states, are freed from any kind of colonialism, and also in peacekeeping forces throughout the continent. Ethiopia has never been declined from extending its hands and also contributing its level best when it comes to the Africa's cause. This is also what we would like to continue, what we would like to pursue. In fact, within this framework of Pan-Africanism and also with the AU-led process, we are very much happy and confident what the African Union, under the chairmanship of His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, is also putting a new chapter, how the continent can design its own programs, can design its own projects, and also can resolve its own challenge by its own. This is what we mean, the Africa we want, the African unity, the African sovereignty, and also the African identity, of course. What it means is the population of the continent also need to be brought into the same picture so that Africans can be considered as African citizens in their own continent, wherever they are, wherever they move. And this is the dream, the vision that my Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, when they met in Pretoria with Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, how in addition to the bilateral fronts, how they can enhance the continental matters, including the various thematic areas of including the silencing of the guns, the gender issues, the peace and stability matter in the continent, and contributing the same to the global platforms as well.